confusing here. We're on the first item under action items. And this is a public meeting, not a public hearing, for the East 7th Avenue Historic District. We'll have a presentation from Landmark staff. We do have people signed up to speak, and we'll hear what our role is in advising City Council on whether this is consistent with our adopted plans. First, let's hear from Landmark staff with a staff report.
Good afternoon. Can you see my screen?
It is coming up. There
Great, excellent. Thank you so much for having us this afternoon. I'm Becca Deershaw. I'm a senior city planner with the Landmark Group within Planning Services. And I'm here with my colleague, Jenny Buttenborg, today to present the historic designation of the East 7th Avenue Steele Street Extension, which is a proposed historic district that includes 19 properties on the east side of the 600 and 700 blocks of North Steele in the Congress Park neighborhood. So the ability to designate individual landmarks and historic districts in the city and county of Denver is set forth in the 1967 Landmark Preservation Ordinance. The purpose of the Preservation Ordinance is fourfold: to designate, preserve, and protect Denver's historic places, to foster civic pride, to stabilize and improve aesthetic and economic vitality, and to promote good urban design. So over the past 54 years since the ordinance was adopted by Denver City Council, the city has designated 352 individual landmarks and 57 historic districts scattered across the city, as you can see indicated on the map. This equals more than 7,200 buildings that are designated in our city. And these properties represent roughly 4.5% of the city's structures that are historically designated. And just as a note, this percentage is on par with other US cities of our size. Of the existing designated historic districts, they are primarily residential, with only 5 commercial or downtown districts. And there are also 2 historic cultural districts that are significant for their cultural history: 5 Points, and then the recently designated La Alma Lincoln Park, which this body saw this summer. The designation process in Denver is community-driven, and applications can be submitted by a variety of people. For this proposed historic district, 3 property owners who live within the boundaries of the proposed district submitted the designation application. One of the major responsibilities of a property owner who owns a historically designated property is to maintain its historic character. When a property is designated, it is designated as is and requires no improvements by the city. But to maintain a property's historic character, we use the Landmark Preservation Design Review for any exterior alterations that require a zoning or building permit. These exterior alterations are guided by the design guidelines for Denver landmark structures and districts, which are a set of flexible principles that provide predictable regulations for owners, applicants, and staff. And total demolition of designated structures is highly discouraged and is difficult to achieve, requiring review by the Landmark Preservation Commission and a public hearing. Over the past several months, Landmark Preservation staff has been engaging with interested property owners within the proposed district to clearly understand the design guidelines and the design review process. We've held 2 community meetings, one in person in August 2021 and another virtually in October of 2021. We discussed that the majority of design review projects are administratively reviewed, like garages, roofing, retaining walls, and so on. And they have a pretty quick review turnaround. We also discussed that larger projects like window replacement require review by the Landmark Preservation Commission and therefore have a longer timeline for review. So now to this particular application. The owners and applicants of this proposed designation are Kenda Fuller, Jane Pritzel, and Tom Heese. The district is located within the Congress Park neighborhood and includes 19 primary structures, 18 of which are considered contributing. As you can see on the map above, this is a discontiguous historic district in 2 separate sections, and it was done this way to avoid overlapping with the existing East 7th Avenue historic district boundary. So on that map, you can see the existing East 7th Avenue Historic District is in yellow, and the proposed Steel Street extension is in red. We have this discontiguous district to avoid sort of overlapping the designation and capturing the two houses on the east side along 7th Avenue that are already designated, as well as the Parkway, which is included in this designation. So the East 7th Avenue Historic District was designated in 1993, and this would be designated today. This designation approach was taken, we kind of call this the Curtis Park model, as this is how Curtis Park has designated almost the whole neighborhood. So rather than amending the boundary for the existing East 7th Avenue Historic District, this proposed district has its own areas of significance and its own statements of significance, as well as its own period of significance. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the proposed Steel Street Extension Historic District will have a period of significance from 1912 to 1990, while the existing East 7th Avenue Historic District has a period of significance prior to and including 1943. So landmark preservation staff finds the proposed East 7th Avenue Historic District Steel Street Extension is eligible for historic designation as it meets the following criteria. It maintains its integrity, it is more than 30 years old, it meets 3 of the 10 significance criteria, and it provides a historic context for consideration by Landmark Preservation Commission. So the 3 criteria that the proposed district meets are: A, it has a direct association with a significant historic event or with the historical development of the city, state, or nation. B, it has direct and substantial association with a recognized person or group of persons who had an influence on society. And C, it embodies the distinctive visible characteristics of an architectural style or type. And I'll go over each of these in more detail. So the proposed East Steel Street Extension has a direct association with the historical development of the city of Denver for its close association with the City Beautiful movement and with the development of the East 7th Avenue Parkway, which runs between the 2 blocks of the proposed district, but as I mentioned, is not included in this designation boundary as it is already designated. The City Beautiful movement was a philosophy of urban planning and design that emphasized grand public buildings, curated public spaces, and the incorporation of green space throughout the city. The goal of the City Beautiful movement was to instill civic pride and to encourage moral virtue among all citizens. The City Beautiful era in Denver began in 1904 with the election of Mayor Robert Speer and extended through the 1920s, capturing both of his terms of office. Inspired by what he saw at the 1893 Columbian Exposition, Mayor Speer's vision included developing an extensive park and parkway system, which was modeled on the City Beautiful movement in Europe. This included beautifying Cherry Creek, constructing Civic Center, and establishing the network of parks connected by boulevards and greenways. The homes in the proposed historic district were constructed between 1914 and 1924, when the City Beautiful movement was in full swing in Denver. Part of the City Beautiful movement included the creation of pastoral parks and parkways throughout Denver, including East 7th Avenue Parkway. The Parkway was constructed between 1912 and 1914, predating many of the homes in the district, but serving as an enticing amenity for future development. Since its implementation, the Parkway has been the focal point of the neighborhood. The shift in the Parkway's design as it meets the proposed district at Steel Street is notable, making these blocks significant as a marker between the older, more formal part of East 7th Avenue Parkway and the newer section where bungalows and other more modest housing styles flourished. The newer section of East 7th Avenue Parkway was designed by Saka Rink de Boer, a well-known landscape designer in Denver. De Boer's approach to landscape design was emphasized using the use of local planting materials, water conservation, and low-impact changes to the existing landscape. The proposed historic district is also significant for its direct and substantial association with Judge Raymond Jones, who owned and lived at 780 Steel Street for over 40 years. Judge Jones was a well-known personality on Steel Street, and he played an active role in the civil rights movement in Denver. He was a notable attorney and judge and was the first African American to serve on the appellate court in Colorado. Judge Jones originally rented the house at 780 Steel Street and eventually purchased the building in 1977. Born in Pueblo, Colorado, Jones studied political science at Colorado College, one of only 5 African American students in attendance in 1964. After graduating from Colorado College, Jones went on to earn a law degree from Harvard University in 1971. He then worked in New York City on Wall Street, but returned to Denver to clerk for the Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court, Justice Edward Pringle. He was appointed as a trial judge for the Denver County Court, where he served for 2 years, before serving another 9 on the Denver District Court, and then moving over as Chief Justice of the Aurora Municipal Court. In 1988, he was appointed an associate judge of the Colorado Court of Appeals, the first Black judge to hold such a position. He remained in this position for 15 years and authored over 1,400 opinions. Later in his life, Judge Jones taught at Colorado College, his alma mater, and Metro State University. He also helped form the Sam Carey Association for Black Attorneys and the Cleo Parker Robinson Dance Theater. Finally, the proposed district is significant as it embodies the distinctive visible characteristics of an architectural style or type. The homes in the proposed district embody the craftsman architectural style, with 16 out of the 19 structures exhibiting the distinguishing characteristics of the style. Defining features of the craftsman style include the low-pitched gable or hipped roof, wide overhanging eaves, often with exposed rafter tails, ridge beams, or knee braces, and full or partial with porches with substantial square or tapered columns. The bungalows in the proposed district were constructed between 1915 and 1924, at the height of the style's popularity in Denver. The only homes not built in the bungalow style include 1 4-square and 1 central passage double pile, but these 2 homes were built within the period of significance and are representative of their era of construction. There is 1 building that is considered non-contributing to the district. 716 Steel Street was constructed in the craftsman style. However, a fire in the 1980s required extensive remodeling, which impacted the integrity of the original design. And here in the upper right is a picture of 716 Steel Street, which is considered non-contributing. Overall, the proposed district retains its historic integrity, which includes integrity of location, design, workmanship, materials, setting, feeling, and association. And while there have been some alterations to homes in the district, including window replacement and the construction of retaining walls, these changes do not negatively impact the historic character or the integrity of the district. And even the building that's considered non-contributing still maintains its overall form and massing, so it doesn't impact the integrity of the district as a whole. Another requirement of the historic district is that it relates to a historic context or theme. The Steel Street extension relates to the City Beautiful era of development of properties in central Denver along streetcar lines and adjacent to parks and parkways. It also represents the evolution and changing demographics of the Congress Park neighborhood from its early 1900s residential expansion to the city's urban renaissance in the 1970s through 1990. The period of significance for the proposed district is 1912 to 1990. This period of significance represents the district's many areas of significance, starting with its construction during the City Beautiful movement and extending through its association with Judge Raymond Jones, who lived in the district during his active life. So that covers all what Landmark is looking at when we're looking at a historic district. So now let's turn to what Planning Board has to consider. So per Chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code, Planning Board may review a proposed designation in respect to 3 things. 1, its relationship to the Denver Comprehensive Plan. 2, the effect of the designation upon the surrounding neighborhood. And 3, any other planning considerations that may be relevant to the proposed district. So as an overview, the proposed district is located within the USUC district. That's Urban Single Unit C, which designates a minimum zone lot size of 5,500 square feet. Blocks are typically have a pattern of 50-foot wide lots, and currently ADUs are not allowed in this zone district. The proposed East 7th Avenue Historic District Steel Street extension reinforces the vision of Comp Plan 2040 through the preservation of important architectural and historic assets in the Congress Park neighborhood, primarily through the vision element of strong and authentic neighborhoods, and within that vision, goals 1, 2, 3, and 6. The proposed district will preserve the city's authentic historic character. It enhances design excellence and contributes to a strong sense of community identity. Designation of the proposed district advances these attributes of quality design through design review of new infill and alterations using a set of predictable design standards and guidelines. And then based on Blueprint Denver mapping, the future place type within the district is low residential. The plan states that low residential areas include predominantly single and 2-unit properties with accessory dwelling units and duplexes being appropriate where they can be thoughtfully integrated and are compatible. Blueprint Denver notes that public parks such as East 7th Avenue Parkway are vital components of the quality of life infrastructure, and that these city-owned spaces are planned to remain parks. According to Blueprint Denver, the district's future neighborhood context is urban. The plan states that the urban neighborhood context consists of predominantly single and 2-unit uses on smaller lots. These buildings are lower in scale and closer to the street, typically with alley access, which is definitely the case of this neighborhood. Regarding the quality of life infrastructure for the urban neighborhood context, the plan calls for parks of various sizes and a bicycle network in the form of protected lanes on arterial streets and integrated into the street on local streets. And that's definitely the case in this area. There's a parkway on there's a bike lane on East 7th Avenue. And this historic designation would not change any of the attributes of this neighborhood. The historic district would allow for alterations and growth or infill that is compatible with the existing neighborhood character through the landmark design review. And design review would be based on the design standards and guidelines. Designation of the district also aligns with multiple recommendations within Blueprint Denver. Designation of the historic district is consistent with Blueprint's vision to embrace the city's existing character and cultural heritage. Through design review, proposed projects would preserve key historic features and ensure it's compatible with the character of the district. And the district would also meet strategy 2A under land use and built form, which recommends using historic designation to ensure residential neighborhoods retain their unique historic character. Overall, the proposed designation is consistent with Blueprint Denver's recommendations and reinforces the plan policies. It also helps advance the Blueprint Denver metric related to increasing the percentage of the city subject to design-focused standards. And lastly, this designation resulted in part from the Block's inclusion in the Congress Park neighborhood survey via the citywide building survey Discover Denver. And thus this project also contributes to measuring the success of Discover Denver, which will be determined by the total percentage of surveyed areas within the city, which is targeted to reach 100% by 2040. So we also looked at this designation in relation to the East Central Area Plan, which was recently adopted. The East Central Area Plan designates the proposed district as an area of historic significance, which is defined as a collection of structures and features identified through the citywide building survey Discover Denver that is significant for its history, architecture, and culture, and is potentially eligible for local historic designation and application of other tools that will maintain its character. The proposed historic district aligns with multiple recommendations within the East Central Area Plan, including policy L9, use Discover Denver to preserve historic buildings and neighborhood character. Policy L6, retain the character of high, medium high, and low medium residential places and facilitate compatible infill development. And policy COPL1, so Congress Park 1, prioritize land use policies that aim to maintain the character of Congress Park, particularly strategy F, consider landmark designations where appropriate. Sorry about that. The proposed East 7th Avenue Historic District, Steel Street Extension, would help preserve the character defining features of the district, and there will be no impact on the surrounding neighborhood, as the designation would only affect the two streets in question, and there would be no zoning changes to accompany the district designation. As mentioned, the designation would not change the Blueprint Denver future place type or neighborhood context. The intent of the designation is to recognize this unique district, the buildings that define it, and their contribution to the historic fabric of Congress Park, the Congress Park neighborhood, and the city of Denver. So far we've received a lot of public comments about this. As of November 16th at noon, CPD received public comments from 27 individuals, 2 RNOs, and 1 interested party regarding the proposed historic district. This includes responses to the city-wide hosted web survey, emails and letters submitted to LPC staff, and comments at the LPC public hearing. Some respondents provided comments in multiple times in different formats, and of those, some shifted their support over the course of the project. So here's a note on the numbers that you see up on the screen. When we received multiple written comments from the same individual, we included all of those comments in your packet for review, but we only counted that individual once in the above figure. However, we did want to list out the total number of comments given at LPC, the public hearing, even though a lot of those individuals both provided written comments, answered our survey, and spoke at the public hearing, just so you can get a sense of the engagement we've had on this process. So as it currently stands, of the 19 property owners in the district, we have 11 owners in support and 3 owners opposed to the district. So at the Landmark Preservation Commission meeting on November 2nd, LPC unanimously recommended approval of the proposed designation with recommendation to move the application to City Council. And to recap, the proposed historic district is consistent with Comp Plan 2040, Blueprint Denver, and the East Central Area Plan. It will have no direct effect on the surrounding neighborhood, and therefore staff recommends approval of the East 7th Avenue Historic District Steel Street Extension application. And I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Thank you. Is there an applicant presentation today?
I believe so. I believe that's Kenda.
Okay, we'll take a look and see. If you, Kenda, if you're here, you could use the raise hand feature. There you are. You should be able to talk.
Okay, I'm live, and are you ready for me?
We're live. We're ready for you. You'll have 6 minutes, and if you are comfortable doing so, if you give us your address for the record.
Yes.
And let us know how to correctly pronounce your name as well.
Yeah, it's Kenda, K-E-N-D-A, Fuller, F-U-L-L-E-R, and I live at 756 Steel Street.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
So now you know who I am, and I speak for my fellow applicants, Jane Pritzel and Tom Heese. I also speak for the more than 20 direct neighbors who provided written or oral support of designation to the Landmark Preservation Commission. We contacted the registered neighborhood organizations that overlap our blocks. You have the letter of support from Chun and Brad Cameron. Vicki Epler from the Congress Park neighbors spoke in favor at the last meeting. Representatives from 7th Avenue Neighborhood Association attended the meeting held in our home. We got early encouragement from Kathleen Riley and Michael Henry. Nancy Widman, who authored the East 7th Avenue Historic District application, provided guidance from the start. We used the inventory tables provided by Discover Denver, and the final editing and invaluable research came from Annie Levinsky at Historic Denver. We want to thank Jenny and Becca for their ability to answer all the questions from our neighbors and all the support they have provided as we've gone through this process. Integrity was the key element we recognized as we began this endeavor, and it defines how we fit into Blueprint Denver and the Denver Comprehensive Plan 2040. Designation will preserve key historic features, recognizing the immigrants who moved in from Eastern Europe and the second generation immigrants from the Midwest who chose to purchase a home here in the 1920s. The bungalow style of design was just coming into its own and was the chosen format for most houses on the blocks. Our homes on this east side of Steel Street reflect the same design elements as the houses that are directly across the street and are in the current East 7th Avenue Historic District. You will see letters of support from residents on the west side of our street who want our homes to remain consistent with theirs. We believe that designation will incentivize the preservation of structures and features that contribute to the established character of our neighborhood. We want to celebrate our history, culture, and architectural identity. Bungalows reflect the changes in lifestyle during the 1920s and 30s and represent the embrace of innovation. Electricity brought the possibility of refrigeration and use of appliances that would save both time and money. Central heating allowed for control of the interior environment, but most houses still have fireplaces as a focal point in the living room. We use our front porches to wave or say hello to our neighbors. From there, we watch families on trikes, bikes, and scooters start out on adventures. You can stand on our front porch and look directly through the porches that align with ours all the way to the end of the block. We believe this reflects a strong and authentic neighborhood. The open space of the East 7th Avenue Parkway, part of the City Beautiful movement initiated by Mayor Spear, remains an amenity for our neighborhood. While 6th and 8th Avenues provide the public transportation that takes neighbors to and from work downtown, 7th Avenue is used primarily by bicyclists and provides a safe place to walk towards Cherry Creek and businesses on Josephine and York. We are honoring Judge Raymond Jones in this application. His lifetime has been dedicated to justice, the result of his journey to Selma as a young man, where he experienced injustice firsthand. In the 1970s, as a successful attorney and judge, he had the opportunity to decide exactly where he wanted to live and chose a house on our block to raise his family. He was an integral part of the neighborhood activity, helping to establish the first block party over 40 years ago. He was recognized at many levels in the city, which eventually earned him a place in the Colorado Black Hall of Fame. We remember a closer connection to the neighborhood, as he also had a sandwich named for him at the restaurant in City Park Golf Course. He was one of the founders of the Martin Luther King Parade, an activity in which our family continues to participate. We have 3 houses on the blocks which serve as long-term rentals. All are consistently maintained. Some of those renters have become lifelong friends, and more often than not, when they leave, they move on to houses they have purchased. We welcome the families who choose to make this home. It's always a joy to hear the sound of children playing in the yard. Our son grew up here and attended 3 Denver public schools, as well as a stint at Good Shepherd Catholic School. We are looking forward with enthusiasm as we read the plan the city has for the future. We have lived affordably in our homes by honoring the innovation and design that grew out of a need for modest housing in a rapidly growing part of the city. We know that change is needed and necessary. We believe that the designation can be a part of the change the city embraces while maintaining a vital story and valuable architectural history. We believe the integrity of our blocks.
I'm sorry, Kenda, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if we have questions, we'll be sure to turn to you as a representative of the applicants. We have 5 people signed up to speak. I'll read their names now, and if you've come to speak to this item and don't hear your name, please use the raise hand feature, or if you're by phone, *9, and we'll add you to this list. Daryl McGregor, David Wise, David Hill, Annie Levinsky, and Caroline Caselli. We'll take the speakers in that order. You'll each have 3 minutes. If you'd start with your name and address for the record. Daryl McGregor. And I'm not seeing Daryl online. If you hear Daryl, please use the raise hand feature. Sometimes with shared computers, your name shows up differently than we're looking for. So we'll keep an eye out for Daryl McGregor. Next, David Wise.
Thank you. I'm David Wise. I live at 756 Steel Street. Historic designation will help our community to manage enlarged homes through design review and will allow for adding dwelling units if zoning allows without losing what made our neighborhood livable, diverse, and desirable in the first place. We believe that the designation will work to further Denver's planning goals. And if in the future ADUs are allowed, our bungalows with typical entryways at the rear, located at a split level stair to the basement, would adapt easily and economically to basement ADUs, an often overlooked way to create more housing within a neighborhood and to avoid crowding our small lots. We do believe the walkability of the neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood would be preserved through historic designation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, David Hill. David Hill, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay, let me start over again. My name is David Hill and I live at 740 Steel Street. My wife and I live here. We strongly support the application for historic landmark designation. We moved to our house about 5 years ago after living in a similar bungalow in Denver's Platt Park neighborhood. At the time, the historic character of Platt Park was starting to change as more and more houses were being torn down. That trend has only worsened as it has throughout the city. We were drawn to Congress Park in part because of the neighborhood's well-preserved historic houses, including those across the street from us, which are part of the 7th Avenue Historic District. Oddly, the houses on our side of the block were not included in the district when it was created in 1992. That made no sense to us as the houses were built at the same time and share the same architectural history and character. The new extension will correct that oversight. Historic designations are one of the few tools residents have to preserve the city's cultural and architectural treasures. Historic preservation is in fact one of the stated goals of Denver's Comprehensive Plan 2040. And that goal is even more explicit in Blueprint Denver, where historic designation is encouraged as a tool to promote design quality and to, quote, preserve the character of an individual structure or district, or whether it is historic, architectural, cultural, and/or geographic significance, unquote. I believe the application for historic landmark designation of Steel Street is consistent with both of those planning documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker we have is Annie Levinsky.
Thank you. This is Annie Levinsky. I'm the Executive Director of Historic Denver, and we're located at 1420 Ogden Street in Denver. I'm here to offer our support to the Steel Street Extension Historic District. Our organization conducted the survey work in Congress Park in 2019 as part of the Discover Denver partnership with the City of Denver. And that project seeks to identify significant resources across our city, and it's encouraged in both Blueprint Denver and the East Area Plan. The survey identified several blocks in Congress Park as potential areas of significance, including the 600 and 700 blocks of Steel Street, and as well as the highly intact bungalow forms and their association for people of interest in our city, most notably Judge Raymond D. Jones. The Jones home was specifically individually identified as significant by Discover Denver. And then later, Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods nominated the home to our 50 Actions for 50 Places campaign, a grassroots effort to identify places that matter to our community. The Judge Jones home was selected by our committee to be one of our final 50 sites. And as such, we became involved and provided additional guidance and support for the Steel Street effort, which is an opportunity to recognize an important Colorado story. We took on research about Judge Jones specifically to understand how his story intersected with his home and block where he lived for more than 40 years. I had the distinct honor of doing an oral history with Judge Jones in June 2021, and his stories of his life experiences, growing up in Pueblo, attending CC, serving as the president of his class at Harvard, clerking for Chief Justice Pringle, and helping form Cleo Parker Robinson Dance, and ultimately becoming the first African-American appellate court judge in the state were extraordinary. His commitment to excellence was clear, and he expressed great affection and pride for his longtime home at 780 Steel, as he selected Congress Park in the early 1970s very intentionally. There really is no other building or place in Denver as closely associated with Judge Jones as the old Supreme Court building where he clerked and where the Court of Appeals was located during his career has been demolished, replaced by the Ralph Carr building. So we encourage you to recommend this designation, and we look forward to working with the block's residents to tell these stories and to access the same resources that the owners on the western side of the block can already access, such as the Colorado State Preservation Tax Credit. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Our final speaker, I don't see any other hands up, but if you're here to speak to this item, please raise your hand. Carolyn Caselli.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Caroline Caselli. I'm at 610 Steel Street. So I'm in the designated area, and I'm here to speak in opposition to this designation. So I'm the CEO of Haven Connect. We streamline affordable housing applications, and as a former social worker, affordable housing is very important to me. The Denver Comprehensive Plan talks about equitable and affordable and inclusive housing plans and making the city, more affordable and inclusive, where what this does is that it essentially is, imposing additional layers of requirements on homeowners and in basically ensuring that it is harder to build things, not easier. I think that this makes it less economically diverse, less racially diverse, and as a result, I'm not in favor of this plan it does not seem like it is in line with the Denver Comprehensive overall vision. So that is my stance on this, and hope you'll take that into consideration as you're thinking about the future of the city and the affordability of the city.
Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our speakers, so we'll now turn to questions from the board to staff, the applicants, or any of our speakers. And we'll start with Fred Glick.
Thanks. I just had a quick question for Landmark staff. Wonder if you could speak a little bit about the impact of a designation on these properties should, as Blueprint calls out, there be a citywide rezoning for ADUs.
So landmark designation doesn't have any impact on zoning. So if there's a citywide rezoning effort, that could go forward without landmark. I will say that ADUs are a historic form we see all across Denver, and it's one of the more popular things that we get in through the design review right now, because so many people want to add some additional space, have some more flexibility. And so we see ADUs every day. We review and approve them through the Landmark Preservation Commission process. So in that sense, Landmark staff is not opposed, and the commission is not opposed to ADUs, but the rezoning itself would go through your body, and the designation wouldn't impact that.
But those are not reviewed administratively. They do have to go to LPC.
Yeah, currently they go to LPC, and they also get renewed. They get reviewed by the Registered Neighborhood Organization.
Thank
who
you.
can offer comments.
Okay, the queue as I have it is Jordan, Heidi, and Gosha. Jordan.
Thanks. I have just one question. You had explained that there's a palpable difference from the west side of Steele to the east side, which is maybe why it wasn't designated as part of the original district and why there's not an extension of those boundaries, but sort of a new district in its own right. I guess my question is it's unique from the west. Is it unique to the east? Is there something unique about this block frontage for these two blocks that's different from Adams or Cook or any of the other blocks sort of along 7th Avenue?
That's a great question. And I see that Kenda's put her hand up. I'll try and answer it first real quick. I think the integrity of these two blocks is much more intact than we find on the other streets. But also in terms of doing a designation, it takes a lot of effort to put together a historic district. And so the neighbors were really concerned with just starting with their block, sort of using it as an example if anyone wants to come along later and do their blocks and sort of that approach. But Kenda might have more details.
Yes, that's correct from where I stand. So the interesting thing, Jordan, is that nobody seems to know why that line went down the middle of the street on Steele Street. It makes a lot more sense that it would go down the alley. And we've done a lot of research looking to find out why that is. What we had to do was to come up with our own two blocks in terms of our significance. And we think we've been able to do that. As Becca said, we didn't want to go any further because this was where we wanted to start. I've already had someone from Congress Park neighbors on 9th and Fillmore contact me because they want to do exactly what we're doing with their blocks. So I think we're already seeing some success from the standpoint where we started this is to say, can we put these into small pieces and really create something that is very cohesive and doable? We've worked on this for 2 years. So having expanded it would likely have taken us more time.
Thanks.
Next, Heidi.
Thank you. Thanks to both Fred and Jordan, because you asked 2 of my questions. So I just have one, and this might be for Ms. Fuller. I'm not sure. So there were, of the 19 properties, 11 in support, 3 in opposition, one of whom we've heard from this evening. So that leaves 5 properties that we haven't heard from. Do we have any insight to those 5 property owners and what's been done to get them engaged in this conversation?
It's a very good question. This is Kenda. So I said that we have 3 rental properties on our block. And of those 5 who have not voiced any support or opposition, or even have said they're neutral, 3 of them are owners who are not actually living on the blocks. We contacted all of them. They knew what we were doing. And so we believe that the fact that they have not come out in opposition to this feels positive from our perspective. And so that leaves 2 more, and I don't even know who that is, who is not supported because, well, the gentleman who lives in, or who bought the house that Judge Jones lives in, and he does not occupy that house right now. No one is living in that house. He's probably the 4th person. And then there may be someone on the 600 block.
So Heidi, I'll jump in real quick to fill in. There are 5 property owners that we have not received comment from via the survey or through email comment. However, some of those folks did attend one of the 2 or even both of the community meetings that we held. All property owners have received notification through 2 mailings as well. So there has been quite a bit of opportunity for people to provide their comment. Sometimes we just don't hear from everybody. They just don't end up reaching out through our survey or through email. And that's the case with these 5 property owners, 3, as Kenda said, excuse me, who have rental properties within the proposed district.
Thank you for those answers.
Okay, next we've got Gosha.
Yes, thank you. I have a question regarding the equity of process. So obviously with the design review, there's additional layer of review process that adds to both schedule and cost. So if the owner of the property wants to do renovations or add an ADU, they're obviously burdened with additional cost of architect and the time in their schedule to do so. Has that been evaluated against the equity criteria in Blueprint Denver?
That's a great question. I don't know that it's been formally evaluated against the criteria. I will say that Landmark staff works incredibly hard to meet applicants where they're at. So if that means helping them through the application process or accepting paper forms instead of email and, you know, corresponding through written comments, we do that occasionally. And our requirements for what we need in an application are pretty consistent with what zoning and building will need. So it's pretty unusual that someone would have to hire an architect to get through our process. And when they would have needed that architect anyway to get through zoning and building. Jenny, do you have any other thoughts?
No, I think you pretty well covered it.
Thank you.
Okay, next hand I have up is Angel.
Hi, just a couple of questions. I know that you stated there's no impact to the surrounding communities, but can you share, maybe Becca or someone else from the city, what generally is the impact of property values with a historic designation in current times? I know, times of depression or recession might look a little different.
Yeah, so we have a great study done by the Clarion Association, Associates, I think they're out of Boulder, that shows that property values in historic districts are generally, they hold on their average with the surrounding areas or are a little higher than the surrounding areas. So they don't decrease property values. We would always love more research, but the Clarion research study, I think, does 3 or 4 historic districts in Denver. And the state uses that as an example all the time.
You say it can increase a lot or a little, or?
I wouldn't say a lot.
Okay.
I wish I had the study up right now, then I could just give you the straight numbers. But a little bit. So usually they're about even.
Okay.
I would just, Angela, just to jump in real quick.
Oh, sure.
Historic districts generally are more stable with property values. So when there are fluctuations in the economy, you see less of an up and down in historic districts than you might in other areas. And that's because there's sort of this consistency with what can happen there, right? There's more of an understanding of the rate of change that can occur. And you see this across the country. It's not just within the state of Colorado, but you see it throughout the country in other areas that have designated historic districts as well. Okay,
thank you. My second question is about the honoring of Judge Jones, and I just want to say right off the bat, I think it's incredible. I think he's an incredible human being, and I mean, just from where I sit, it's wonderful that he's being acknowledged and honored in this way. That's at face value. Just want to dissect it a little bit. I know that area is not extremely diverse at this time, unless I'm mistaken. And so you just have to ask. I know, Annie, you said you spoke with him and had a chance to interview him directly. What's his thoughts about the designation, and what are his family's thoughts?
See, Annie Levinsky's willing to answer that question.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So like I said, I got a chance to meet him and his son and daughter-in-law last June. He's moved away from the neighborhood to live with them now and is retired. He was, and I want to be cautious because I certainly never want to put, words in his mouth, but I did ask him how he felt about this, and he seemed very enthusiastic. He talked about how proud he was of that home, how hard he worked to maintain it over time. And I've kept in touch with his son and forwarded him the final application and other materials, and he was appreciative of having that and of the recognition that his father's getting.
Any concerns expressed by Judge Jones or the family?
Not to me, no, they did not express any concerns.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, Ignacio.
Thank you. So my questions have to do with the second criterion, the effects on neighborhood. Let me continue with Angel's line of question. How many districts, half of them or whatever, are named after a person?
That's a great question. Most of them, I believe, are geographically named. I can think of, off the top of my head, I'm starting to add them up. There are some that are named after developers or architects, like the Snell Historic District, which is nearby to this, is named after Frank Snell, who developed the area. But most of them are geographically based.
All right. Actually, we have the Chris Anna also landmark. No, it's not a landmark. It's a preservation district. Now I can't even remember. Okay, that's good. Number two, some of the opposition comments were regarding windows, and I know that the Secretary of the Interior guidelines for preservation always focus on leaving the existing windows as part of the integrity of the architecture. What can neighbors do? What can neighbors do about their windows that are not energy efficient and so on?
So that's a good question. There actually, I think, is a lot of flexibility in the windows, but we need the Landmark Preservation Commission is concerned with keeping the character of original windows, and so oftentimes you need an assessment to show that windows are deteriorated. Like any other part of the building, if they're not maintained, windows will deteriorate, and we understand this. And in some cases, it is appropriate to replace them. In other cases, there are different things you can do. Window repair is remarkably effective at making things much more energy efficient. Replacing single pane glass with double pane glass is also a possibility. Adding storm windows is a great way to increase the insulation value of the windows. So we try and take it out of the sort of replace or not replace binary and look at other options. But we also understand that sometimes windows just do need to be replaced.
Okay. And I don't know if Kenda has anything else to add on the windows. It was more of a rhetorical question. So people who are in opposition can see that there are possibilities for solutions to their window problem. Next, the property at 780 Steel Street, the Judge Jones property, that zone lot is actually, or that parcel is in two lots from what I can tell looking at the plat map. If current owner or future owner wants to split that property, they would, I guess, the second parcel, the one facing 8th, would have the option of developing to its full potential within the historic preservation district, right?
That's correct. So any zone lot amendment would need to be reviewed by the Landmark Preservation Commission, and they would look at the historic context to see if it was appropriate to split that lot. In this case, we talked about those 50-foot wide lots that we see throughout the neighborhood. And if that zone lot met that case, I think that the Landmark Commission would be comfortable splitting that lot. Any redevelopment that happened there or infill development would need to be reviewed by the Landmark Preservation Commission to make sure that it fit into the character of the district. It would also go through the R&O review process. So the East 7th Avenue Registered Neighborhood Organization would review it as well.
Okay, and last but not least, the one property that is not a contributing property still fits within the character of the neighborhood. But I guess if they wanted to demolish and reconstruct, hypothetically, they would be able to do it a lot easier than any of the other historic contributing properties.
Yeah, in theory, they would be able to come to the commission, say, listen, this is a non-contributing property. The fire in the 80s really destroyed the integrity of the building. We'd like to demolish our structure and rebuild. But then any infill projects that went in there would need to be reviewed by the commission, and it would need to fit all of our design guidelines and standards. So it would maintain the character of the district.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I've just got one question that regarding the design standards and guidelines. I know that recently, in recent years, Landmark has adopted design standards and guidelines, and there's, for many districts, chapters that capture the character defining features. I didn't happen to see in the application that sort of a drop-in set of pages with character defining features is provided. Is that a follow-up step?
Yeah, so the East 7th Avenue Historic District itself does not have character defining features. It's something the staff has definitely sort of been working on. There's a draft that we're working on currently. And I think our thinking is that because the character of the two districts are so similar, we would probably put them together and have the community review them, of course, to make sure that these truly are the character defining features of their neighborhood. And I think that would be at a future phase, but the guidelines really work well for East 7th Avenue. You know, I think you all saw La Alma Lincoln Park. The character of La Alma Lincoln Park was so different from the character of most of our other historic districts. It was critical that we had its own set of guidelines that could really focus in on what's important to that neighborhood. And here the guidelines work pretty well. And so we rely on those. But if we hear from the neighbors, especially that things aren't working, I think we can definitely make that more of a priority. But just in case anyone wants to know, we are updating our design guidelines, and we have a meeting tonight to talk about it so people can come and share their thoughts.
Great, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up for questions from board members, and that's the portion of the agenda that we're in. So I will close the public hearing and ask board members to deliberate on whether this meets the criteria we're being asked to evaluate: conformance with the comprehensive plan, which of course includes its supplements, Blueprint Denver and the neighborhood plan, effect on the surrounding neighborhood, and other planning considerations. We'll start with Heidi.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to recognize Ms. Caselli and her concerns, and forgive me if I mispronounced her last name. I have those same concerns. We definitely have plan guidance that speaks to providing attainable and affordable housing. I expressed these concerns in another hearing on an architectural overlay district that I voted no on, that I felt like I had solid plan guidance, a solid plan-based argument to be able to vote no. In this case, I don't feel like I have that. I feel like it meets the plan guidance, and I am going to be in favor. But I did want to take a minute to let Ms. Caselli know that you're heard. And I read the comments of the others who oppose. And my request of staff would be that you work with any of these folks in this historic district when they need to come through to think about Gojja's comments on equity, the cost that it creates for these folks to be able to make improvements to their homes, to be able to bring in ADUs and infill, and to look for ways. I know that there's funding that's going to be available immediately once they're in a district, but to always be looking for ways to solve those problems for folks, because I absolutely share that concern that it is difficult to live in the city from a cost of housing standpoint, and want to be thinking about how these things impact that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jordan?
Yeah, I just have a short comment, and I want to thank Heidi for her comments, because I think they're right on, and I agree with them. My other comment relates to the question I asked. I agree that this meets criteria, and as a result, I will vote in favor of it. It seems to me, though, that this is very opportunistic method of designating historic districts, and I think it's fairly debatable whether half of a block is a district at all. And I think that, towards the point of my question, if there is more integrity to this neighborhood outside just this one block, it feels like in the future, an inclusive process that asks district-wide for those areas that kind of contribute to an overall actual district scale designation might be just a more compelling case. Although I don't think there's anything wrong. I think these houses are great, and I think they're definitely well preserved and indicate a certain era of our development of the city. I don't know that they're unique to the point where they are their own district, but in terms of what we're being asked to evaluate, I don't think there's much question on my end, I suppose. Thanks.
Thank you. Gosha.
Yes, I want to echo some of the concerns that Jordan and Heidi raised. I think we do see historic designation used as an anti-housing or anti-growth tool. And I agree that this meets the criteria. And my comment to that point is that what we're preserving as a historic character, we're not preserving the uses or the zoning allowance as it may change in the future. So I hope that everybody is aware that as we work on implementation of ADUs and missing middle, those districts are not exempt from additional housing growth and acceptance to as housing. So I will be voting in support, but I also want to acknowledge the concern of how we accommodate growth and how we use historic preservation in that conversation.
Thank you. Ignacio.
Thank you. Yes, it meets the criteria. The main criterion being the blueprint, and on the side of equity, all things being equal, you would be able to do all the things that we discussed. Add an additional dwelling unit, and so on. The inaccessibility for most of the I don't know what the home values are here, but they are way over the 100% AMI, maybe even on the 200%. So the issue of equity here is not just because it's a historic district. I actually communicate with the idea that a historic district will kind of balance the ups and downs. I think that is a true statement. The issue of affordability in a neighborhood like this is related to something else than the historic district. Now, talking a point about what my colleague Jordan Block was saying here, actually, most of these historic districts are citizen initiated. And I think that is a great merit to it, because if you get all your neighbors and you write to all the property owners in what you think is the district and so on, and get 11 out of 3, and then 5 undecided. I think those are pretty good statistics. And there is contiguity with the 7th Avenue Historic District. So I think it is, I would imagine if it was an island in the middle of nowhere, you would actually really question, well, 19 properties, they have to be, something extraordinary to become a historic district. But here, because of the contiguity and the citizen initiated effort, I think it adds to meeting the criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Jordan.
Yeah, just I I hear what you're saying, and that's a really good perspective. I'd push back a little bit. I think that it being citizen-led is, is a merit to it. But speaking as a citizen who lives on a block myself, like everyone else does, your purview of what is a historic district might not be at the scale that someone who sort of understands the scale of a historic district, like Ms. Levinsky or others on the call, might. And so as a result, it seems there's probably often going to be cases where your focus is much more narrow than a district actually implies, or maybe wants to be. And so I see your point, but I do think that that it sort of is like biting off little pieces here and there, and it might not be the only route to accomplish this. And to your point of it being contiguous, it is contiguous, but it's notable that it's not part of the contiguous district, right? It's not actually being added into the district with which it is contiguous because it is not considered part of that district. So though I understand your points and I appreciate that it did sort of change my perspective when you said it, I'm not quite there with you, I guess 100%.
Thank you. Ignacio?
Yeah, just actually, I remarked on that as well, that why not change the boundaries of the district? The explanation that we were given was acceptable. I would actually do exactly what you just said. I would change the boundaries of the district, but I guess maybe I failed to ask that question. I did have it in my mind and I didn't ask it, but I guess we're past that point. I guess it will be bureaucratically more feasible to approach, but maybe in the long run, if you have one district is cleaner in the map. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just comment, I do think this meets the criteria. Blueprint Denver is quite clear that we're to pursue historic designations where it makes sense. Landmark has clearly said it makes sense. This is consistent with the intentions of comp plan and all of its supplements. I'll just make a couple comments that already made, I think, best by Gosha about how it does not get in the way of some of the recommendations in Blueprint Denver. Accessory dwelling units were discussed. I want to thank David Wise for bringing up interior or attached accessory dwelling units. So a basement apartment, not done nearly as much as I think it might be, because it's such a much more affordable way to add a unit than building a whole new structure. But that is not precluded in any way by a historic district. Missing middle, Gosha mentioned as well, to be defined what we mean by that, but Blueprint Denver charges us with looking at that. Historic Denver in presentations I've been to, not about this district, but just generally in the last few years, uses a great photo of a house. You recognize it as a house that's been around for 100 years, but happens to have multiple mailboxes on it. And you see this all over the place where things have been subdivided until in our wisdom in the city, we made that illegal to do. If we explore making that not illegal to do once again, this historic district would not preclude that. And just one final note, since Curtis Park was mentioned in all this discussion about is this an addition to an existing district or a new district? The good news is it makes no difference in terms of the administration of the landmark district. So the same rules apply, the same criteria applies. And once the district is established, it's a curiosity that it was done in multiple parts. I participated in landmarking most of Curtis Park, which we did in 4 steps. And there were 4 very small landmark districts preceding it. So I can see why we were mentioned. We have 8 districts. But to Jordan's point, when you zoom out and say, what is it that got landmarked? It's exactly what you'd expect. It covers the extent of what feels like a district, even though it happened to have been done in multiple steps. With no more hands for deliberation, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to recommend that City Council approve application 2021 L005 East 7th Avenue Historic District Steel Street extension, finding that the district application meets section 304.6 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code, and that the designation of the historic district is consistent with applicable plans, including the Denver Comprehensive Plan and Blueprint Denver, and will have minimal impact or effect on the surrounding neighborhoods.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Fred and seconded by Angel. Discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll move to a roll call vote. Angel?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Fred?
Aye.
Gosha?
Aye.
Heidi?
Aye.
Ignacio?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. With 8 votes, that passes unanimously. Thank you. We are